Welcome to Miami Lead, where some of Miami's most influential minds share their stories, insights, and strategies to help you grow and lead with purpose. We're glad you're here because everybody wins when a leader gets better. And now, Pastor Bill White.
Well, welcome to Miami Lead Season 3, where our commitment is to bring fresh inspiration and actionable insight from leaders who are actually living it and doing it in Miami to other leaders who share the same value, because we know everybody wins when a leader gets better. Welcome to the podcast. For over 2 decades, Diana Diaz has brought the news to South Florida as anchor of WSBN TV. Many of us know her from those days. More recently, her day job has involved corporate communication executive. And today, she is our special guest on Miami Lead. With decades in the media spotlight and her training and experience in journalism, it is a privilege to welcome her powerful insight on how the media and communications landscape is shifting, and then how leaders can stay grounded in truth and clarity amidst the noise. Can hardly wait for our conversation. So join me now as we welcome Diana Diaz to the podcast.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So good to be here. On this side of the mic, it's a little strange, I will admit, but it's so nice to have this conversation because I think it's so relevant, especially to everyone at any age, any stage.
Absolutely.
In light of what is now real communications in the palm of everyone's hand. So.
Yeah, and for leaders, whether they're leading in marketplace or business or community or neighborhoods or churches or schools or family or public service, to just be able to, I'm looking forward to some takeaways today, and glad to welcome you. The topic is so significant and so challenging, but I really want to begin just by asking you to bring us into something about the power of story, your professional experience in this, and then the significance of words.
Words, as we've seen in light of recent events, are invaluable. They are so important. Words matter. Words are so powerful that they can invoke emotions. They can take you from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. And it is really important to not just be aware of that as you're receiving words and communications, but also that you have the power in the words that you put out and how it affects those around you. So I would say that they're invaluable, right? We look at the Bible and storytelling is where we derive our hope from, where we derive lessons from, our values, and really it is no different today in storytelling and learning from people's triumphs, mistakes, tragedies is how we're able to sometimes get the fortitude to move forward, or the inspiration to take a turn, or even to be able to connect with others. It's all through words, if you think about it. And it really is the basis for, I think, humanity and connectivity. So I think words, and especially storytelling, really matters. And it was very interesting because I had a choice at some point. I went to the University of Florida, go Gators, although this weekend we may need more prayer.
There's a game coming up.
More prayer against the University of Miami Hurricanes than normal. So, so when I was in school, I made a decision to go either into law or journalism. And when I first had a taste of journalism, that's when I knew this is where I could make the most impact, because every day was different, and every story that I encountered and the people that I interviewed impacted me, and I knew that they would impact others. So I'm so glad I did, because I became a storyteller, really. As I entered journalism here at WSBN, I was one of the youngest reporters hired in this market, which was really overwhelming at the time. I remember my mom saying, well, you either fake it till you make it, or you don't make it, so you got to make it. And,
those are some pretty
absolutely
powerful words,
Mom,
right there.
Yeah, she's sitting right there. So it was very true. And it was, you're thrown into certain circumstances, and you realize as you grow in the field that you have a responsibility, not just to tell someone's story, but to tell all sides of a story, because it's not truth until you have all those factors into it. So,
Well, that was something I want to talk about, because if words matter so much, as a professional, I'm wondering, and you learn through the years, what kind of care would you give when it came to treating words?
it was a huge responsibility, actually, especially starting out as a young journalist, in that there are so many sides to a story. And it's very easy to have an opinion and only want to share that side, or only focus on what you think is a wrong and vilify a certain person. But it's also important to hear that person's whole story, right? Because without the entire story, you don't know the whole truth of that story. I remember it was 1999, and I was the only reporter for some reason in the area near a hospital, and there was a call of a young boy that had washed ashore, and it was late at night, and I thought, this is a mistake, can't be. It ended up being, sure enough, I watched, and my photographer and I, as he was wheeled in, and he had this blank stare on his face as we got closer, and sure enough, he was a little boy that was found floating in the water offshore, and it was Elian Gonzalez.
I remember that story.
And for those of you in South
we all
Florida,
do down
it
here.
probably rings a bell, especially if you're of a certain age, because it really was a defining moment in our community. I'm an exile myself. I came here from Nicaragua at about his age, and my mom actually put me on a flight to come here to the States by myself. So there was an affinity with this story, and it was really impactful because, as you all know, we have a huge Cuban exile community in South Florida that really empathized with the fact that his mom, and some others escaping communism in Cuba, took their lives in their hands, and they died at sea, leaving Elian Gonzalez alone to come to shore. What eventually evolved into a huge situation, not only in South Florida, not only a national situation, but a global crisis situation, where this young boy was here with his Miami family, who fought to keep him in the United States, thinking of the sacrifice his mother made. But then there also was his father back in Cuba, who wanted his son back. So what evolved, and for many of you who lived it, I know I lived it, and the reason this story comes to mind is because I had personal attachment to it. So I could have been perceived that I had a certain side to it, but I had to put my own emotions and experience aside to be able to tell the whole story, both sides to the story, and there were multiple sides to it. And depending on your background or your beliefs or even your political affiliation at the time, you could have had a position, but it was a huge responsibility that I took, and every time I told that story, to tell the whole story, all sides, both sides, because it's not just one item. And so I feel like that was the best example of that. I actually broke my ankle because a mob, we had one of the first pieces of video from inside the house where he was staying, and we had to cover up we had a partnership with Channel 23 at the time that we were the only ones that got the video, and they put our photographers and our crew covered up the windows of the van so they wouldn't see the video. But the crowd outside started rocking our van, and the word started spreading that, everyone should see this video, et cetera. And we were just working on getting the video and then sharing it with our partners so we could do it both in English and in Spanish. And as a result of that, me trying to escape that, actually, I was trampled, and I ended up breaking my ankle in that chaos. But that's how elevated the emotions were. So even in that, I had to maintain my calm, and I had to keep in perspective those core values of journalism, which is tell all sides, be fair, accurate, and make sure that everyone is able to get the information, not a select few, right? So in that,
I think in one of our early, excuse me for interrupting.
No,
Did you?
go ahead.
In one of our conversations over the phone, in anticipation of this time, you mentioned that there is a standard of ethical behavior for journalists. I don't know what you call that, but I think that'd be interesting for us to hear.
Would you believe there is? Sometimes they question
This.
journalists like myself. Once a journalist, always a journalist. And yes, there are a code of ethics that is part of our profession. The Society of Professional Journalists has part of their code of ethics is always seek the truth, for instance, always go to the source, verify, corroborate, and always try to tell the whole story, all sides. Fair and
And
balanced.
journalists are trained this. There's a
Correct. So as you go through, you learn the law of ethics as you're, going through schooling, and there are standards that we have to abide by. And so when you become a journalist, this is something that we always try to strive for and be factually correct, tell the whole truth, the whole story. And I know that this may seem a little cliche because I did work for Fox News, but we report, you decide is really a core value of a lot, just across the industry, fair and balanced reporting. So
Are there checks and balances
and
built
checks
in?
and balances, yes.
And is it
So-
self-monitoring, or is it kind of a systemic? How does that work?
So in a newsroom, it's wonderful because there are different layers to reporting. And not only do you have to make an effort to get both sides, you also have to consider the source and corroborate the information. So as opposed to what you see today, that whatever little tidbit of information just goes out and is on the algorithm and you're seeing it before anyone even verifies if it's accurate, not to mention AI, because it's a whole other topic that I'm sure we'll get into. Journalists have a responsibility. Once they get the information, corroborate it, make sure it's accurate, factual, and then take the extra step to get the other side. Most self-taught journalists, commentators, influencers don't have that. So a lot of what we're seeing today is not that.
I had this fleeting thought come through my mind about Lee Strobel, who I believe was a journalist for Chicago Tribune on crime, and he said that they used to have a sign in their newsroom that just said, "Trust your mother, but verify."
Correct.
So,
Very good, very true. And on top of the parameters that we have in newsrooms is, I remember having a knack for getting exclusives. But as part of that, it meant, well, we have to make sure that we have to check with our sources. We have to verify with authorities. We also have to make sure this is true before we put it on the air. And there are times that I've seen throughout my years where information went out that was inaccurate. And once something goes out that is wrong, it has done damage, regardless of if it is later corrected. And that's something I think we can expand upon because...
I'm not asking you to drill down, but you've had some experience with that. What do you do when you're facing a mistake that now needs to be corrected, or the next step?
So I don't know if you all recall the Covington Catholic situation. May not ring a bell right away. And what it was, it just comes to mind because of this. It was a snippet that someone captured, and that little snippet of a high schooler with a MAGA hat seemingly berating a Native American elder went viral. And it went viral and caused significant damage, death threats, things that he himself, his school, his family will never recover from. As it turned out, when the larger clip was shown, he was exonerated because it showed the real picture of what really happened. And the media outlets that went with that small clip without verifying and going through those steps eventually lost a very huge and a groundbreaking defamation lawsuit. And the reason why I bring that up is because sometimes, even if you try to correct it after the fact, the damage has been done. The damage that was done to that gentleman, his family, his school, is something they'll never be able to recover from. No amount of money or sorry or, we made a mistake will ever be able to go back in time and correct that. And even I say that because, I think anyone in any environment, whether a newsroom or outside, has been in a situation where, I think leaders, by the way, don't need titles. I think everyone in this room is a leader to some extent in their circle of influence, right? And so I think about it that, if you get a piece of information, and it's a snippet of information that, and in this cancel culture, it's so easy to jump on that, be judgmental and put it out and want to frame a person in a certain light because of limited information that you have, right? And you have that choice. I go to the journalistic code. You have a choice. Do you pause in order to take a moment? If you're a faith-based person, do you pray about it? Let me pray about this before I take any action. Okay, let me do the next steps, which really are universal. Let me seek the truth. Let me go to the source. Let me corroborate what this is. Let me get all sides. Let me try to find the truth before I convict a person, either in my space, in the public domain, even in telling another individual. Because once you paint somebody in a certain light based on a sliver of information without the whole information, you've done damage. There is no exoneration for someone. Once that's spread, there's no way that an impression hasn't been made about someone. The damage is done, and we all have that power in our environments, right? How many times have you dealt with internal, coworkers or bosses, et cetera, and misunderstandings, and depending on someone handles it, it could either be a learning situation where everyone can learn from and grow from, or it can be very damaging, and people's lives are at stake, not just their jobs, but their mental health, families, that you don't know what kind of impact that has on a person and what that would do to them internally and the effects. So I say with something like that we could take from journalism into real life is that each of us has a responsibility to take a moment to verify, to make sure that we understand the full story before we go spreading something that may not be 100% accurate, that could affect people's lives around us. And then that was a perfect example in the news because it really did, no matter, trust me that 100% of the people that heard the story, not 100% of them ever heard he was exonerated, or they saw the clip and they got the image, and that's what's embedded in their minds because it's unfortunately kind of the society that we're living in today.
Well, let me frame it and ask it a different way. It seems we're experiencing democratized communication in a totally different way than we've ever seen before. And what I mean by that is that everybody's got a platform, everybody's got a microphone, if not a podcast or a blog, and everybody's got a story to tell. So it's like this is a good day for freedom of speech on one hand. And then you're talking about complications that come from that on the other hand. Talk about what it means to be in an age of algorithmic journalism. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Oh, yes, I do. We live it. We're all living it. We are all feeding into the algorithmic journalism. Everyone here, every time.
What does it mean? What does algorithmic journalism mean?
And I think you all, we joke around it's in the algorithm, but it really truly is. And studies have shown that, especially in today's day and age, the information you get on your phone, the vast majority, there's over 50% of it is based on those stories that invoke an emotional reaction over any story that is just factually based and has both sides. So in essence, the algorithm and things you're seeing on your phone are directly related to how sensationalized they are. Regardless of if it's true or not, that is what gets to the top of the feed. And that's just a fact. Then in addition to that, we also know that your particular search patterns, the things that if you and I, Bill, switched phones right now, I would be lost. I would not know where to begin. Where is my Amazon marketplace? Why am I getting, brown slacks and influencers who
suddenly I'm
Lee
feeling
Strobel.
nervous.
I wouldn't be following Lee Strobel.
Let's see, what's on my phone that Diana's going to see?
And you'd be seeing all kinds of things that you would not be familiar with. And that is a pure fact. If we were just to do a little experiment after this and switch phones with someone that's, just even a different age than you would see what I'm saying is true, because the phone, our interactions, even our communications, and sometimes these conversations will result in, I had a conversation about pots and pans. I don't cook, so anyone knows that would never be on my algorithm. And immediately after, it was ads for a line of cookware. So I think we would all be convinced.
Do you wonder who hacked your phone?
Correct, right. And that's part of what we do. Your information is being sold, and not just for an agenda, but also for entities that are making money off of your information. And so you are a live, active participant in that. That's creating an algorithm that's suited directly towards you. Now that, in context of this conversation, is dangerous, because you're getting and being fed back only information that you're more likely than not going to agree on. So you're not getting opposing views, and you're definitely not getting the whole view unless you seek it out.
So my algorithm is sending me right now, channeling to me and excluding from me information.
Correct.
So I'm getting a limited slice, and the rest of the story is somewhere else that is not being fed to me by my algorithm.
And I would say that in light of recent events, unfortunately, we've all been, if you have a phone, subjected to the tragedy that unfolded recently with Charlie Kirk. And one of the biggest examples of that was strangely ironic. I was in a car with 3 other individuals on the way to a meeting. It was raining, so that's why we chose to drive together. And I happened to be sitting next to someone who works for the organization that he works with, and she immediately got it on her phone. Others of us didn't get that headline in the same way she did until 20 minutes later, 15 minutes later, and it was all in different ways. That showed me very clearly that even the way that someone is perceived and someone is spoken about, the headlines about a particular fact, that in the olden days, for those of you under the age of 20, there used to be 4 networks, and that was it. And we, 4 networks, had a responsibility to check, make sure information was accurate, and for the most part, you got the same information across the board. That's not the case today. Depending on who you follow, your belief system, and the way that even that headline came across was very different depending on your belief system. And as we've seen as a result, whether you liked it or not, you couldn't pick up the phone, even now, in this aftermath, without seeing very extreme points of view. And it really is unfortunate, but it's based a lot on the algorithm. And a lot of times I think, my goodness, I don't think people even realize, and who can blame anyone really, if they see someone in a certain light because this is all they've gotten on their feed, or because their point of view has edited things in a certain way, and someone else has quite the opposite. How would you be able to know that something else exists unless you seek it out? Somewhat similar to the Covington Catholic conversation, because that didn't come out till later, right? But unfortunately, because we have influencers, we have pundits, we have commentators who make their living off of views, likes, etc. Depending on whatever side of an issue someone's on, they're incentivized to create an emotion and frame things in a certain light from both sides, one side or the other. So that's why you see this, and and I've never seen, I don't know if maybe I share this with you, many of you, even in something as benign as Facebook posts with people who would never even normally engage in this type of conversation, fighting each other, unfriending one another because of perceived positions on an individual who used his words for a living. So we have to not be blind to the fact that we are all part of this machine that is being fed by our interactions.
So I want to back up a little bit in the conversation, but I'm ready to take a turn toward, okay, so what do we do? But with that in mind, the democratizing, where everybody's got a microphone and everybody's got a podcast and everybody's got a story that is theirs to tell, they feel, but perhaps not the framework that you learned as a journalist on ethical behavior, responsible communication, that you would be held accountable for, and your employer would be, and your industry would be. Mm-hmm. So that's like the dilemma that we find ourselves in. We want to affirm, yeah, everybody's got a voice, and there are lots of complicated issues connected with that. So what do we do? It's like, what is the next step, or perhaps some guidelines that you could offer? Maybe the better way to ask it is, what do you do? You know, with your training, your background, how do you deal with some of this unfiltered speed with slander and huge platforms but no accountability?
So during the election time, you know, at least in my home, we had certain individuals that were watching a certain channel, and that was what they watched. And it would upset them for me to turn on the other channels. Why do you watch it? I can't stand them, you know, et cetera, et cetera. You can just imagine, you know, maybe you have this in your circles, right?
No, none of us know we don't know what you're talking about.
The reason I did that, and it's funny, you know, even biblically, right? Jesus didn't shy away from opposing views. He leaned into it. So whenever I would listen to the other side, and why would you? Well, if in order to know what you really stand on, you really should know what the other side believes. Not only to educate yourself to see the full picture, because there are some valid points on the other side, so that you can have an educated exchange, so you can understand the other side. If nothing else, if you're so convicted in your own beliefs, to solidify your beliefs even further and maybe make your argument that much stronger, right? But if you don't, who's going to do that for you? If you keep going around in the same circles with the same people that have the same belief system, how are you ever going to really have a full view of the truth, right? Because there are multiple sides and multiple points of view. And it's not just about listening, but really learning about other people's points of view and why they feel that way, right? Because for the most part, we're usually around people that have like-minded beliefs. So I would purposely seek out other points of view. It would drive people in my home crazy, but I felt it was important because I want to know the full picture, and I want to be able to create a position based on both sides. And I want to be able to solidify my position even better. Well, you know what? They made a point, and here's another counterpoint. I think we need to actually go out of our ways to do that, because if we don't go out of our way, especially now with what we're programmed in our phones to receive, it's not going to happen on its own. So I definitely would encourage, and it's hard when you go to search something else. Sometimes it takes a few tries. Sometimes when I use my husband's phone and he's on TikTok, I'll say, "Play that again." Well, because I don't get that stuff. What are you even on? What part of the web or the dark side of TikTok are you on that you're even? I never even get that. I want to hear what that is, right? So it sometimes is even hard to get that information, but I encourage everyone here to not be numbed to what you're receiving, what you're seeing, but to seek out opposing points of view. With recent events, I did that because I couldn't understand my impression of a person based on what I saw. How could anyone have an opposite view? But then I got it because of the clips that were framed in a certain light, and if that's all anyone saw, well, I understand now. But the truth is, it lies between all of this. It lies in taking the time to look at the full exchange, not just the clip that suited this type of narrative, right? But it takes work to seek that out. And unfortunately, we in this day and age have a 2-second attention span. We don't have newsrooms that are doing that for us, getting all sides, verifying before we put things out, making sure to reach out to someone else, and then putting a package together that gives you more of a fair and balance. That's not happening. So, I mean, you really would have to, and I encourage people to seek that out and not just accept what's coming through the phone.
So I'm hearing at least two things out of what you just said. One is a desire to stay aware of what's going on generally, and how information is being shared, an awareness of your personal perspective on a matter, and that you're not surrendering your personal perspective to enlarge your awareness of the larger perspective that perhaps isn't one that you agree with. So awareness is one piece that I'm hearing. And then the other one is to give it attention and with a listening that requires you to perhaps get uncomfortable about listening. And then that made me think that about a scripture verse that says, let everyone be slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to anger. If only it were as easy as it is to say. But that seems to be the same wisdom that you're talking about.
And I think even in life, it goes back to practical applications. Jumping to conclusions is probably the worst mistake anyone could ever make. Because
It doesn't help me in my marriage, I can say that.
in any relationship, if you're really seeking truth, you wouldn't want to do that. I will just piggyback on what you said to point out two things that we don't take for granted. And that's the amount of time we're allowing to spend on something that is occupying our attention, our thoughts. I know that now with violent acts, before you'd have newsrooms going back and forth, blurring, making sure that it's acceptable for public view. You just open it, and I didn't even ask to see this, and I'm seeing it. Our kids are seeing, there's no filter whatsoever. And I mentioned AI earlier. There is now no way to know if what you're seeing is actually true. It is unbelievable. Now, on the flip side of that, I will say that there was a time, again, there were 4 networks, so all the information you got was filtered through 4 places. Now, on the good side of that, is you are getting voices you would never have been able to hear before. Information that can't be hidden if corroborated and verified, you wouldn't normally have. I remember a time where TMZ started becoming pretty good at getting information no other networks could, and we actually had a conversation in the newsroom. How do we deal with this? Well, we attribute it to TMZ, and people can make their own choices, but now you're getting sources, for good and bad, from all kinds of different places. And all I would say to that is not only just to be aware of, consider the source and verify and seek out on your own, but also cautionary tale of how much time are you allowing that to eat away at your brain.
Speaking of time, ours is out. So I'm going to have to bring us to a point, but I do have one question I want to give you a chance to respond to, though. We ask every guest on Miami Lead and this question about faith. I know you to be a person of faith and an active spiritual life. How does that work in light of all that you've said? Your personal faith factor into the wisdom that you're sharing with us today as a leader?
You know, I would say that we're in the world. We're not of the world, right? But the truth is we're in the world. So sometimes you get it right, sometimes you don't. Oceans, the song Oceans by Hillsong United on repeat. It just repeats. And I play it lately a lot because it is so easy to be in this world and be caught up and try to control situations on your own, and really rely on your own strength, your own knowledge, and all of that to come to some conclusions or to, the best path forward for different situations. And I'm constantly reminded that even in the tough situations and the easy situations, if you're a faith-based person, that it's so important to take a moment and go to God first, even in a quick prayer. And in that moment, it can be the biggest difference between making a right decision and a wrong decision. It really can, even just the pause. And I say that song because we're every day facing challenges and storms, and you don't know what you're going to step into on any particular day. Little side note, I was leading the Global Leadership Summit a little while back, and the morning of the, we were preparing, I've got some, I didn't know if I would share this, but I guess I will. Some really personally heartbreaking news at the moment, and I had to get up there and stand, and here I am, Global Leadership Summit, and my son had just been diagnosed with cancer within that last 12 hours, and it really tested me because of the waves that will come, right, and we still have to keep moving forward despite that, and leading, and people don't know what others around you are going through or what your leaders are going through. And so that song really hits home because it really just helps you always shift back the focus despite what the world is coming at you with, that, at least for me, what has gotten me through the hardest experiences is my faith. And if I did one thing right as a parent, it was to be sure that my kids had a faith foundation, because everyone will disappoint you in this world, but God never will. And so I wanted them to have an independent relationship with God that they could always lean on in good times, bad times, things they share, don't share, and whether I was around or not, right? So I think for me, having that faith foundation has helped me through all kinds of, periods in life. And by the way, my son, thank God, is cancer free.
So glad to hear that.
You. But,
well, let me thank you, Diana, for sharing something so tender and personal with us, but also that we can share that good news that you just closed with today, and for bringing us into your desire to give them some foundation from which to face the challenges of the world as well. Thanks to those that joined us on the podcast. We'll look forward to connecting again next time on Miami Lead.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Miami Lead. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and visit miamilead.org to join us live. Remember Colossians 3:23, do everything as for the Lord. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, and remember, everybody wins when a leader gets better.